Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live at the Waterhole. This is a glorious start. I can't think of a better start, in fact. A nice elephant bull enjoying the fruits of the season. Well, I'm sure he is enjoying the actual fruits of the season, but this time he's enjoying the water. We're here at Hyena Pan in Botswana, always a wonderful place to start. So nice to see an elephant. You know me, I love an elephant. And if you don't know me, it's me, Trishala. If you've been with us the last couple times that I've been on Live at the Waterhole, we had some really nice, interesting discussions, so many brilliant questions from you wonderful people. So keep them coming. And you can do that, of course, because we're live and interactive. If you'd like to talk to us and send us questions and comments, you can head over to our website and register to do that. Or you can keep up with the conversation on Twitter or X. Just remember to use that hashtag WildEarth. You can also scan that QR code to get through to us. And if you're in the YouTube chat, remember to use @FC. So our wonderful crew in the final control, like our director Nadine, can know that you want to chat to us. Now, Live at the Waterhole takes on a different pace compared to our sunrise and sunset safaris. We really have a unique opportunity with the cameras that we have with Africam across the continent. And this unique opportunity is the fact that we can sit in the comfort of our homes and we can observe in a different way to when we are there in person. You're not interrupting the animal whatsoever. And we can spend so much time with animals because of this, which means that we can start to look at different things. And we can only see what the camera sees, so we don't get distracted. We can watch little movements, and that's my favorite thing about Live at the Waterhole. What I noticed here with this elephant bull, earlier, before he reached the little well, he gave a bit of a head shake in the water when clearly there's nothing around that he might need to intimidate, particularly another elephant or a predator. And that's what we usually associate the head shake with. And then it made me think, maybe sometimes just out of irritation, frustration, they give a head shake too. And now I'm noticing, of course, that he started playing at the well by putting one foot onto the wall, and now he's got both in there, and he's very carefully using his trunk to feel around the well wall. These are the little things that I love to notice during Live at the Waterhole. And we have some hellos coming through. Erica, you say hi, Trishala, and everyone else. A big hello to you too, Erica. Joanne Mello, you say good Friday, Wild Earth and Trish. A happy Friday to you too. Mercedes is in the house. You say greetings, Trishala, Wild Earth crew, and chatters. Happy Friday. I'm so glad that everyone seems to be so happy that it's Friday. I too am happy that it's Friday. Do you know, it's quite odd. I quite like Mondays. I like Fridays too, but I like Mondays as well. PBN Jam, you say good morning, everyone. It's so nice to hear your name again. It's always such a pleasure when we get to know new members, and you, PBN Jam, have participated in some interesting conversations too. So I invite you to continue to send through those questions, send through those comments. But also to really get stuck into the feeling of it. I often say to audience members that if you don't feel like sending questions or comments and you just want to observe and you just want to get stuck into the sights and sounds, this is the place to do it. Live at the Waterhole is all about those little things. And as you would know, I also like to give you moments to settle in, to enjoy a sighting before we get into information and learning. Both very important things. So I'm going to give you that opportunity right now. Watch this elephant bull. He's really putting on a show for us with tiny little movements. And what could they mean? So think about that for the next few seconds and also listen to the beautiful sounds. So, lots of interesting behavior here. And I think I might have figured out why. You saw him being quite particular around the well, dipping the tip of his trunk in, feeling around. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw a red patch at the end of the trunk. Now, I have noticed before that when elephants get injuries, and I mean smaller injuries, not injuries that are a threat to their survival, they tend to express pain or discomfort, which I think is quite interesting because most animals tend not to express those things. Because remember, if you express those things, it's a sign of weakness. And if you're an impala and you're injured, you want to basically not try to show it. I recall times when I saw impalas with some pretty serious injuries and they just carried on like normal. And that's an important part of survival because as soon as you show that you are weaker compared to anyone else in your group, it makes you a target. But elephants, really, they're especially big elephant bulls, their only concern, I mean, it's really only other elephants. So if you're by yourself, maybe there's another couple elephants around that are not your competitors. You you can show that discomfort. I've seen it expressed with elephants kind of twisting the bottom of their trunk, constantly touching wounds, especially if they're near the face. Like one of our cameras, the Aldonio cam in Kenya, that camera has quite a famous elephant, and his name is One Ton. Maybe we'll get a chance to see him. But he was last seen about 10 to 12 days ago on that camera in the evening. But he had an injury on where his tusk originates. So, you know where the tusk joins the face? That fleshy area? He had an injury there and he just kept touching it, kept putting water in it. And he was expressing some sort of discomfort. And thinking about the first elephant we saw, I think he might have been expressing that too. We saw the head shake at the beginning at what appeared to be nothing. We saw that head shake, again, maybe frustrated. If we compare it to what this elephant bull is doing, and it's a similar size as well, pretty straightforward. Straight to the well, had a little drink, and nothing too unusual. A couple more chatters have joined us. Catherine, you say hi, Nadine and Trishala. Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for jumping on board. Lenny, you're the best. Thank you very much. Harry Lowly, you say hello, Trish and FC and all the wee chatters. I wish, oh, you wish you were in Ellie now playing in the water. Cape Town is so hot and sticky. Well, if I were you, I'd just be enjoying the hot and sticky because we all know how Cape Town can get pretty cold and windy. So if it's really nice and hot and not windy, I say God and enjoy it. But yes, we get you. Maybe go visit a pool. That would be nice. Except don't do any of that until 2:30. Is that a deal? So we can stick around and continue to watch all the wonderful animals we get to see during Live at the Waterhole. So if you've seen this camera before, Hyena Pan, or if you have been watching it through the seasons, you would know that usually this well is on its own. There's no water around it. There's water in the well, but not around it. But clearly they've had some good rains and it started to fill up the actual pan section. And it's almost the height of the well. Ah, now this is interesting. This elephant has also put his leg up on the brim. I wonder if he'll put in the other one as well. And he's also touching the edges. What do you think it could be? Sometimes we try to figure out what's happening and why it's happening. And we forget that sometimes, particularly for animals that are considered intelligent by our standards, and I say by our standards because we can only really compare what we understand of intelligence when that might not be a true reflection of what animal cognition is like. But in simple terms, sometimes those animals that are quite intelligent, elephants, primates, sometimes they do things because they can, for fun. Umpire, you were saying, what is it doing? Is it just having fun? Well, that's the thing. It is kind of unusual, and I say unusual, I mean that it's not what we expect to see, but it might not be indicative of any particular response or anything like that. So I think he might just be having fun. If not just having fun, maybe just very curious. The last time I saw this camera, the water level wasn't this high, so I'm not sure when the rains came to provide this difference in water levels. And maybe that's interesting. And so the elephants are curious. Maybe it looks like the well is not a well anymore and it's just a ring in the pan. Another thing I'm noticing is that the elephants, both this one and the one that came before, that had the little ouchie on the end of his trunk, both of them had a very, very small drink. If water is good, elephants will drink continuously. And if we look over on the other side of the pan, you can see that there's lots of elephants drinking there. And they seem to be consistently drinking, not just a dip in like we've seen with these two bulls on our side, on the well side of the pan. So maybe that water quality is not great. And as they were walking through, the two bulls we were looking at, you could also see that they were kicking up quite a lot of sediment. So I'd imagine that's not the most comfortable way to drink anything. But they didn't even splash on themselves. Maybe they're distracted by the breeding herd that's over on this side also. Sir 50, you say, what a beautiful location. It really is. And what's quite astonishing is if you look at what this pan looks like during the dry season compared to how it looks right now. It's quite a crazy transformation. Donna, you're asking if I think it might be because the well is submerged in the water. That's what I was thinking about earlier. So normally the well isn't submerged, and it's quite clear that it's a standalone well. Maybe now that it is submerged, it's a point of curiosity. And we know that elephants are very intelligent, and one of the things that goes along with intelligence is complex social structures and relationships, but also curiosity. And elephants display both those things. Wild at heart, you say. Such a beautiful place, Botswana. So many beautiful places to see. There are so many magnificent places to visit, and so many different little habitats. Damon Michael, you also say beautiful elephants. They are stunning. Ooh, that's interesting. Can you see an injury there? The cow on the right, have a look at her trunk. She's got the little calf with her. About halfway down her trunk, or up her trunk, whichever way you want to look at it, she has an injury. Oh no, she's out of shot. Maybe we can go back to her in a moment, but she almost looks like she has an abscess or had an abscess, or perhaps a puncture injury that just kind of widened. Now, those are very interesting injuries because elephants still seem to be able to use their trunks when they have those kinds of injuries. We'll chat more about it if we're able to swing back and have a look at her again. Lucas Feldman, you say, hello, Trish. This is really an interesting point. You say, have you noticed that they've had lots of rain, but still no grass growing around the pan? And this is a perfect example of that. I have noticed this. And the dominant vegetation here are these mopani trees. Now, many plants, I don't know specifically if this is a mechanism that the mopani tree uses, but given that there isn't grass around, I suspect that this is something that it may use. Oh, I'm actually I'm thinking about two things now because I see there are some small patches of grass, but I can't tell if that's actually grass or it's something else. But there's two things that could have happened here. One is that mopani trees, like many other trees that grow in groves, are able to produce chemicals that exclude growth of other species. Now that's advantageous because it means that only mopani kin, so saplings from mopani trees, are able to grow. We see a similar thing for tambuti, and you might, if you've seen tambuti groves, you'll also notice that there are patches where there's no, it's just bare. So that's one thing. So maybe, Lucas, that's what's happened. The other option is that lots of movement has compacted the soil. So we know that we see lots of elephants come down here. Maybe because there isn't a lot of grass growth in general in this area around the pan. That means seed dispersal is maybe not as effective. And you have constant compacting of the ground. What that does is it means that there's very little air in the soil. It can be more difficult to germinate in that soil. And soil needs a good amount of microbes in it. And that's because plants release fatty bits into the soil. And by doing so, as we know, oil or fat and water doesn't mix. So what ends up happening is those fatty acids that build up in the soil, they can make the soil hydrophobic, and then water can just run off it instead of being absorbed into it. Now, microbes are important because microbes have the ability to break down those fats. So a good amount of microbes means that the soil is going to be nice and healthy. So those are two options. Now, I gave the second option because I noticed that there were some patches of grasses every now and then, which could, of course, mean that maybe the chemicals that mopani grove mature trees push out into the soil to make sure that it excludes the growth of other species, maybe it just didn't reach those patches. Or maybe it has nothing to do with those mechanisms at all. These are some really, really nice elephants, everyone, and some really fascinating discussions. But I'm going to send us over to Old Donyo in Kenya because there's something equally fascinating going on. How sweet is this? Just a giraffe chilling. Now, it's not something we get to see often, but it is not unusual either. Giraffes will lie down. When I say lie down, this is it. So maybe sit down is a better option. They will sit down, they will even tuck their heads onto their rumps, have a bit of a lie down, have a nap. But when I see giraffes sitting like this, busy chewing, I know two things. One, they're ruminating, and two, they're feeling super comfortable. In fact, you see a lot of ruminants take a seat, if I can say that, when they are ruminating, and it feels like such a comforting thing because they must feel safe in order to do that. Now have a look at the mouth. You can see it chewing away, and then it's going to stop. It's going to swallow, and another ball of cud is going to come up through the neck, back into the mouth, and it will suddenly start chewing again. There you go. Wow, my timing there was really good. I'm surprised, to be honest. we could only just see the movement of that of the cud coming up through the neck. Interestingly, as I said to you, if giraffes are going to have a little nap, then they would sit like this as well. But they can also sleep standing. Adult elephants can also sleep standing. They have an interesting set of tendons that have what's called a stay apparatus, which basically works like a ratchet. So they don't have to engage any muscles or anything to stay upright. They can stay upright completely in place and have a small nap. They just can't do that for long periods. Unlike bats, which also have a stay apparatus, and they can hang like that for hours. Giraffes, for me, are a very curious animal, and not for the obvious reasons of having nothing else look like it, pretty much. And I mean, they're interesting for plenty of reasons. The fact that they are able to get blood to the head when the heart is so far away from it. The kind of unusual physiology and mechanisms to make sure that this animal can do what it needs to do to, be alive. And also really interesting biology and evolutionary biology. But in right now, not just thinking about the past, giraffes are one of the mammals that have the littlest amount of sleep, which is a little bit puzzling to scientists because sleep is such an important part of. Oh, I'm just going to have a full lie down. Do it, giraffe. Have a full lie down. Get some sleep. So they have some of the smallest amounts of sleep in the mammal kingdom. And how exactly they are able to function with just a couple hours of sleep a day, it has really been a mystery. A PB and Jam, you'd like to know if giraffes have two stomachs? Giraffes are ruminants, so they have a four-chambered stomachs in the same way as cows do or buffalo do. So they have a gut biome that is responsible for breaking down the cellulose in everything that they eat because, of course, they're herbivores, so they really need the help. So they have that whole stew of bacteria in the rumen section of their stomach to help them break down all those, basically all those fibrous cellulose walls, cell walls that we see in plant matter. So a four-chambered stomach. Oh, nice, Lucas. This is exactly what I love to do as well, and also what I'm glad that I could give you the space to do. You say that around Letaba area and Kruger National Park, where there are lots of mapanis, there's also less grass growing. So I might be right. And you also said thanks because I let you think a bit. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Giving ourselves, and I think we all have quite an innate knowledge of what of the natural world. It's just kind of giving ourselves the space and time and taking um, yeah, just taking the time to indulge ourselves in thinking about these things. But I think it's there in us. Rachel Tubman, you say you've never seen a giraffe sitting down before. They do. It's not often that we see it, but it is sweet. And here at El Doño, where the pan is almost always monopolized by elephants, it's good to see that the giraffes are having a go. There's about four or five of them around. Donna, you're asking if it's true that giraffes don't drink much. Um, I suppose it is in terms of their requirement. What they need in a day doesn't well, basically their lifestyle doesn't need them to be totally water reliant. So they can drink once a day if they need to, whereas say elephants and buffalo, they will drink several times a day. But that being said, it pretty much that's just the giraffe's capabilities. Just like, I might be able to hike 20 kilometers, but doesn't mean that I want to be doing it every day. You know what I mean? So just because a giraffe doesn't need to drink every day doesn't necessarily mean that it won't. If water is available, it might drink several times a day. Like at this, and it also depends on the season. If water is available and it's the wet season, it's probably going to drink a lot. At times when water is not available or as readily available in the dry season, it's not going to have to drink a lot, and it doesn't need to either. I think we might have Just missed the vulture feeding, but how about we head over to Victoria Falls Safari Lodge and just see if we can still see some vultures? Oh, nice. There's still a couple pieces of meat here and there for them to enjoy. I'm noticing lots of squabbles. I'd like you to pay attention to those too. Um, Also, try to figure out if they're happening between different species or between the same species, stuff like that, because that's really interesting to observe. So I'm going to give you a moment to do that. Mercedes, you say, yay, feeding time. It was feeding time indeed. Oh, and now we're looking at them riding a thermal. This is so cool. If you're not sure what we were looking at and why there were so many vultures together there, here at Vic Falls Safari Lodge, they run what's colloquially known as a vulture restaurant. And what that really means is that scrap meat from the restaurant gets thrown out for vultures to be able to eat. And that's because vultures in southern Africa, all our species are endangered. And a lot of the endangerment comes from consuming poisonous carcasses. And that may be a result of animals being shot with lead bullets and then vultures coming down and eating those animals. Or it could be a result of people purposely poisoning vultures, which is a problem as well. So these vulture restaurants where the meat we know is clean and that the vultures can feed is an important little bit that lodges can do to help the vulture population in the area out. Now, you might think that maybe that's a bit of a slippery slope, and yes, indeed it is. But at the moment, not a whole lot of lodges are doing it. They don't supply enough to create dependency, and the vultures in the area, as soon as they eat, even if whether they do or don't get a piece of meat, they quickly move off. As you can see here, begin to soar, and they will continue to look for carcasses in the area that they can feed on. So the biggest thing for me is that at the moment, at the rate at which vulture feeding is happening, and the amount of lodges that are doing it right now, it's not creating dependency. And for me, that's a big thing. And the way that Vic Falls Safari Lodge is doing it right now, it's small amounts, it's just a supplementary feeding program. I think this works well. PB and jam, you say, ooh, dramatic, isn't it? This is probably one of my, I can't even say, I can't even use the word favorite anymore. Everything's just so amazing. But I love to see large birds using thermals. And when we have an area where there's so many vultures coming together, once they fly off, you're going to get a number of vultures flying off, and so you can really see that thermal. What a thermal is, it's just hot air rising. During the day, the surface of the earth, or well, I should say, be more specific, the surface ground here starts to warm up. And that warm air pushes up through the cooler air. And so you get this column of warm air that's rising. And if you think about the way that birds fly, they need to create lift, right? So there needs to be sufficient pressure underneath their wings, and that pressure from underneath their wings needs to be stronger than the pressure over the top of their wings. And that's essentially the definition of lift, right? So if you're a heavy animal, or a heavy bird rather, and we know that flying is very energetically costly, you're going to take whatever help you can get. And you can see with the tilting of the camera and the movement of the birds that they are getting higher and higher and higher riding this thermal. Doesn't it almost look like a Renaissance painting with the clouds? Oh, Catherine, exactly. You say watching vultures fly is so relaxing, which is why I've just stopped talking. And I think I'm going to give us a few more minutes here just watching the clouds and the vultures rising, and then we can move on. Erica, you say you would like to be a vulture in those clouds right now. I know. It's so mesmerizing. I mean, maybe I'm just being myself, but it almost feels like they're doing a little dance in the clouds. I love it. We will move on in a moment, but I just wanted to answer Vince's question. Vince, you wanted to know if vultures only eat dead carcasses or can they take live prey? That depends very much on the vulture. Vultures are quite specialized, and that specialization is usually in the beak because that can tell you a little bit of information about what they eat. So, for example, hooded vultures have a very small beak, so they're going for smaller bits in between ribs, on the bones, stuff like that. But generally, and most vultures, and I'm talking here about old world vultures, so the ones that we get here in Africa, most of them feed at carcasses, so they're only taking carrion. But there are a few exceptions to that. White-headed vultures will take prey as well, small mammals. We might see a palm nut vulture, and palm nut vultures are named so because they eat the flesh from palm fruits. And there's some vultures that will even take things like nestlings, eggs, so not necessarily carrion. But for almost all the vultures, bar the palm nut vulture and the the I was about to say white-backed vulture and the white-headed vulture, bar those two, almost all of them are exclusively eating carrion or carcasses, but certain parts of it. So some might be better at getting tendons and bigger pieces of meat and opening up the carcass. Others will be better at getting marrow inside the bones. And others might be better at getting those smaller bits of flesh that's left that the other vultures can't eat. But white-headed vultures are known to take to actively make kills and take live prey. And we do not see a white-headed vulture here. Most of the ones we see here are I haven't seen a lappet-faced vulture here, but most of them are white-backed vultures and hooded vultures. And just before we're moving on, having a look at those vultures soar and using that thermal, PB and Jam, you say the bird's understanding of heat and moving air is amazing, and that you bet 1,000 beach rocks that those birds can feel the air differences at a microscopic level. Well, I'm sure they can because their lives depend on it. And if you think about how you know the you are not consciously thinking about your body in space, but you know exactly how when something feels off, you know exactly when you're about to fall because you feel that you've lost control. It's so much that we know about the way our body moves in space. And we might not think of it on a conscious level, but there is an innate understanding because it directly affects our survival. And I think it's exactly the same for birds. We have a hooded vulture conference here, possibly a fight. No, maybe a bit of love instead. And Ari, you say that some of those clouds look like rain clouds. Some of them definitely did look like rain clouds. Those are cumulonimbus clouds. They build really high and they can produce other rainmaker clouds like nimbostratus clouds. And completely what we expect for this time of the year. Anyway, how about we head back to are we going to Safari Hook? Where did we say that we were going, lovely Nadine? I started talking about vultures, and then I got stuck into it. Hyena Pan, that's it. Let's get back over to Hyena Pan. The elephants are still around. Oh, everyone is loving this well. So before we had the two elephant bulls that were here, and now we have a breeding herd that's come through. That little one definitely seemed to have enjoyed itself. I kind of like as well as the mother of this little one started to move away. Not that I know its mother specifically, but just out of behavior, I could tell because it's following its mum. As soon as mum stepped away and the baby was still there, it's almost like everyone else stepped back, almost to give some space to the youngster to be able to catch up with mum. A lot of three or let's say even four of these elephants between the ages of about 2 and 4, maybe even 2 and 3, which is a great age. It's when they're still very desperate to have mum in sight, but they get distracted very easily by playmates, by water, and so they can be particularly entertaining. It's also really interesting to observe the ways in which different calves behave. They can be very individual and have a lot of personality. Like some will follow mum in tow and, if I could say, seem very well behaved, while others can be of the same age, can be very naughty, have to constantly be called by their mums. And I like that. Before I started working with animals, well, as a guide, I used to work a lot with animals in the capacity of science and data. And so you think more of the species in that kind of work, not necessarily individual animals. And when you get to know individuals and you get to know that they have specific personalities, it's just the most wonderful thing. And it's such an enriching experience to understand that each single individual has their own characteristics and their own personalities. And I've seen it from turtles to elephants and everything in between. I dare say I've even seen it in spiders. There have been a couple of jumping spiders that were dear friends of mine, and others who just didn't want to play with me at all. And also had different personalities. Like there was this one jumping spider that just loved my hair. And he would stay on me, But as soon if I'm walking around, he would stay on me somewhere. And as soon as I stop and I sit down or something like that, he's straight for my hair. And he'd just sit in the hair and play with it. Whereas other jumping spiders would still be okay with me and they'd be on my hand or stuff like that, but they would not be interested in my hair. So there's personality and individuality to be found all over the place. Shongololo, earlier when we were here, you sent through a comment saying, wow, it's a completely different place, just gorgeous. Yeah, that's what can happen with the rain. It can completely transform somewhere. Again, elephants putting their legs or their feet against the wall of that well. Now they are known to, I suppose they are known to touch and feel with their feet. You see them doing it with roots and with rocks and things like that. So maybe it's just another curiosity. Hey, Eagle Lover, you also had a comment from earlier when we were here at Hyena Pan, and you were asking, could the soil in the pans contain salt? They certainly could. It would depend the amount of salt that is present and whether it would even be noticeable would depend on what the soil type is in this area and what the mineral composition is. And I can't say that I know what it is like here at Hyena Pan. Given the paleness of the soil, which is really a very rough indicator. It looks like it could be mineral rich, but it also looks a little rough. It doesn't look super smooth and it's not super pale like we see in tau, which we know is mineral rich. If you're not sure what tau is, we'll head over to that camera in a bit. But I think it would depend on what the composition of the soil is here. But just in general, most soil does contain some amount of salts, but whether it is noticeable, whether it really makes a difference at all to anything, depends on how much is there. And that I don't know. But I do know that elephants are very sensitive not only to the taste of things, like we see when they look for the quality of water. They prefer water that's really clean. And if you have that preference, it tells us a few things. It tells us that you must be able to taste when it's not clean. Otherwise, how are they making that decision? So you must either be able to taste that it's not clean or that it's not up to your standards, or you must be able to smell that. And elephants have a very well developed olfactory system, which is the portion of their brain that deals with decoding smells. So they can smell very, very, very well. They can even smell if they want to eat this plant or not, and are able to make that decision based on the different chemicals that plants release. Some plants release chemicals in self-defense. And so if an elephant smells that, it might not eat that plant. And I don't mean that species, I mean that specific tree. So it wouldn't surprise me to find out that they have a very well developed sense of taste as well, because those things are closely related, taste and smell. And given that we know that the tau camera in Madikwe Game Reserve, we know that tau is a very mineral rich area, and there is a high, probably a high salt content. I say probably because I don't know the exact salt content, but we know that animals lick salts there, and elephants seem to drink there just fine. I don't think it's salt that's causing them to not drink at that well. Not that I think that's what you were saying, but I was thinking about that as we were talking about salts. Oh, this is lovely. Can you imagine having this massive tonnage of a body that you have to lug around all day, and you're eating constantly and you're almost always on your feet? And then you get to some water that's big enough and deep enough to carry some of that weight for you. Mustn't it just feel glorious? I think it must feel like such a relief. Quite interesting. And Mika, who's now in the director's chair, also noticed this. This elephant has a very, I wouldn't even call that a tail. I'd call that a stub. And his buddy, who is in the water with him as well, also has some of his tail missing. But this guy here has almost his entire tail missing. Ari, a pool party indeed. Elephants have the best pool parties. There's no disputing that. Look at the slight lifting up of the trunk as he moves. Now, that's a great way for elephants to be able to pick up on the direction of a scent. So we spoke about how excellent their sense of smell is. And when they pick up their trunk like that, it gives them information about the direction from which that smell is coming. It's also something that we see when they meet other elephants, but I think that's also related to smell. A visual cue to say, hey, hi, almost like a wave. Oh, we're getting some really nice close ups here. Just looking at the tip of this elephant's trunk. It looks like either there's an. Oh, thanks for the photo bomb. We're trying to have a look at your buddy's trunk. It looks a little injured. Ah, yes, there we go. There was I could see the injury properly there. It's on the underside of the trunk. And off it goes. It's just feeling a bit self-conscious. Shame. Self-conscious about your trunk in front, self-conscious about your trunk in the back there too. So the elephant that we saw earlier with the similar injury was a cow, and this time it's a different elephant. It's because it's most certainly a bull that has a similar injury. Interesting too. Oh, it looks quite fresh. Now we've got to get a good look at it to determine what type of injury that is and what could have caused it. Okay, here we can see the injury quite clearly. It looks like it might have been. It looks like it might have been a snare injury. Doesn't it kind of look like when you, if you have ever wrapped a hair tie around your finger, then you get a swelling on each side. So it looks like at one point there was something tight around this elephant's trunk, but it could also just be swelling and inflammation from that wound, which looks pretty new. Oh, is there a hippo in the background there? I don't think I've ever seen a hippo here. Oh, thank you, Ellie. Showing off that underside very nicely for us so we can have a look at that wound. There's a couple things that could cause that. One is it could be a snare injury. It could also be from sharp branches and things like that. It could be like a little piercing from a thorn that became infected and then started to widen. It could be from an abscess. But I've seen injuries like this many times in elephants, and some that look much worse than this. Some that look as if you are so sure that that tip is going to fall off because there's so little connective tissue left. But they survive like that for a long time, and doesn't seem to pose any problem. And what I also find really interesting is that clearly, in order to suck using their trunks, they have to be able to create a vacuum, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to create that suction. And now, with a hole in your trunk, that seal is broken. So, how is it creating that suction? But somehow it seems to still be able to do it. I've seen elephants, in fact, at the Oldonyo camera, with a really large cut in the trunk and was still able to drink by sucking up water and depositing it into its mouth. And it almost looks, because it was such a gaping hole, you could almost look into it, but you could see that water was traveling up the trunk. And yes, there was a little bit of spillage, but more, I wouldn't even call it spillage, more like splattering of the water as it moved up the trunk. And you could see that the water was moving against the top part of the trunk, not the underside. So almost as if they were able to compensate for their injury so that it hardly affected them at all. And here's the hippo I've never seen before. Have any of you seen this hippo here at Hyena Pan? It wouldn't be surprising if not, because this is now prime property. It's filled up beautifully. It's a fair size. Now he just needs a couple of cows to make his life complete. Lucas, thinking about that elephant. Oh! Sorry, Lucas, we were interrupted by a pirouetting hippo. But you were thinking about that injury and you say maybe a crocodile bite. It could be. Most of the time I've seen crocodile bites, it's been quite, I mean, because of the bite force of a crocodile and the death roll of a crocodile, they usually take off the whole tip of the trunk. But I have seen times where a crocodile has not taken off the tip of the trunk of an elephant. In fact, I saw it on the cameras at Victoria Falls. There was a crocodile that seemed to target elephants like specifically go for them as they're drinking. And the one time he really snapped on one elephant's trunk, and the elephant swung that crocodile around. If you can find that clip on YouTube or on Africam, go ahead and have a look, because it was unbelievable. And that elephant didn't lose the tip of its trunk. So, yeah, it could have been a crocodile bite gone wrong kind of thing. So, what do we think about this guy? I love to see the underside of a hippo, to look at their bellies and their legs up in the air as they spin around in the water. I think he might have been just testing the waters. Ha ha ha. But I think he was actually, if he is a new hippo and this is a new territory for him, it's kind of like just testing it out. Now, it might not be ideal because of the lack of. Who are you displaying to? Because of the lack of grass, but that's not going to stop him. In terms of priorities, watery territory is number one. You can always walk to get food. Oh yeah, I think this guy's happy with this waterhole. He's claiming it as his own now. He's been doing roly-polies, being showing off while we were looking at the elephants. Then he was in the background. We could see him showing off his teeth. Now he's spraying his dung, and he's still continuing to display. He's claiming Hyena Pan as his. Let's see if he goes all the way around the pan, or maybe specific game parts that he would use to make his way to grassy areas to feed at night, because those game parts and around the pan is the fundamental areas for him to demarcate through that dung spraying, mostly, as those tend to last longer than just baring your teeth. I really liked spending time at Hyena Pan today, but our hippo is slowly moving away. Best of luck, hippo, with your new territory and marking it out. We are going to head over to Tau in Madikwe. That's the area I was telling you about that has that really mineral-rich soil. And we have some ostriches. I think there is more than one, or at least I heard that there was more than one. But now this guy is just having a bit of a feed. Tao is looking amazing. Probably the biggest transformation from all the cameras, in my opinion. so green. In fact, you can hardly see what I was talking about with those very pale mineral rich soils because it's been totally covered up. To me, they kind of look like almost like snakes when they're lying down and it's just their heads up. But they're also the perfect color to reflect bare branches in the bush. A nice gray. We've got some impala in the top left and some waterbuck in the top right. It was sometime last week. It might have been Friday last week, or maybe even Monday last week, actually, when Mindy asked about whether all birds have hollow bones. And it was such an interesting question because we have known for a long time that birds have hollow bones, and it's really important because it allows them to be lighter, which is important for flight because the heavier you are, the more difficult it is to fly. And so I said I would do a little bit of research. And ostriches are one of those birds that don't have hollow bones. And it makes sense because they're flightless birds. But also, ostriches can be really heavy. Exceptional birds can be, 100 kgs. So they can be super heavy. And they need the type of structure that will support that. So they have solid bones. And then I started thinking about other birds. And in fact, a bird that we will visit in a bit as well. But penguins also don't have hollow bones because that would mean that it'd be difficult for them to dive. And I like this information because it seems so simple, but if it makes so much sense, right? Because they're not flying. Hollow bones are adapted to assist in flight, so it follows that those birds that don't fly wouldn't have hollow bones. And also remember with ostriches is that they can run really fast as well, up to about 70 kilometers per hour, which means that they again need the structure in the form of bones and then the musculature to be able to attach to those strong bones to provide the energy and force required to be able to run at those speeds. Something else that is quite interesting is that flightless birds evolved from flying ancestors. While it might feel counterintuitive because you'd imagine that flightless birds are probably the most ancient because from before flight developed, but the bird-like features were already there. But in fact, it's the other way around. And I remember thinking about it once when I was quite young, like in high school. And it felt I had thought that flightless birds would be the most ancient. And it was kind of nice to come across this information and revisit it again. and see the way in which we change and relearn. And from watching this ostrich feed, you would be able to tell very, very quickly that they are vegetarian or herbivorous, and they're mostly, pretty much only eating plant material. And they clip the tops of it, pull the nicest, softest, most juicy bits of the plant material. Oh, Mindy, you are here! I hope that you heard the bit about bones. Before I was actually looking for an ostrich, so we could chat about their bones, and I even asked Mika, "Is Mindy in the chat?" I didn't hear her name, so I'm glad you're here, Mindy. And PB and Jam, you're wanting to know if they have a large variety in their diet. No, they pretty much just eat plant material. But they have a variety of plant material that they eat. Sometimes they might even pull up roots, especially those of the grasses. Like as they pull the grasses, it's not just the tops that they're going for, which is what we saw now, but they might even pull the whole thing out and eat the roots too. And they strip branches as well. I mean, they might take some flowers and eat some seeds, but for the best part of their diet, it's just plant material. There was an experiment conducted with ostriches where they had decided to present ostriches with some harvester termites and some insect larvae, and apparently the ostriches were ate it, but it was in a closed environment or experiment setting, and it wasn't presented to them in the wild. So we are not able to say that in the wild they would eat these as well. But in that particular experiment, in this closed setting, they did eat those harvester termites and the larvae. Oh, don't these wildebeest look lovely with these yellow flowers in the foreground? I actually can't tell what flowers these are, but they look very asteraceae or daisy-like. But I can't tell what they are. In fact, I'm not even sure I've ever seen flowers at Tower, to be honest. Oh, everyone looks so happy. Just bathed in the abundance of the wet season. So, shall we head over for a change of scenery to Stony Point in the Western Cape and have a look at the other birds that have solid bones? Yes, you, I'm talking to you. You have solid bones, don't you? Nice and dense bones to make sure you can dive properly. Very, very important. Interestingly, and please don't judge me, um, if you know me well, you know that I have many um, oddities that I collect, random things like skulls, bones, fur, things that I come across that I think would be interesting to look at under my microscope and stuff like that. Anyway, one time I was at Betty's Bay, which is this area, and actually on the roads, like in the suburb around Betty's Bay. And I had pulled off on the road to check my tire actually. And it's a very quiet place. Anyway, I found like a piece of a flipper on the side of the road. Clearly, a penguin had died, and it was very, very old. I mean, the bones and everything was still exposed. So the skin had gone away, the feathers had gone away, so it was pretty old. And I could have a great look at the bones of a penguin. Anyway, fast forward a couple years, totally forgot about that, and was packing up house and found in the zipped pocket of one of my backpacks, just random penguin bones. And so next time that I get to see you all on screen, not through Live at the Waterhole, maybe I'll be able to show you those bones so we can actually see how dense they are and how very like any other mammal bone it is, but just smaller. I mean, it is a flipper, so that is where hand finger bones would be. But it's remarkable how much it looks like any other bones of a fingered animal. Deb Davis, you say you like that? One day I will I'll show everyone my collection. Every now and then, when I'm in Juma and I get to take game drives, then I sometimes bring along interesting things of mine because the main purpose of it is I find that it's so easy to learn when you can see something and feel it and really look closely at it. And one way to look very closely at something is to have a microscope. And Mindy, you say you gotta love a go, has her own microscope. Um, I love my microscope. I really do. It, I mean, it's not the most powerful microscope in the world, but it is enough for me to be able to investigate things. But I have lots of random interesting things, and I used to collect these things from the time I was quite young, to the dismay of most of my family. Erica, you say that would be interesting, and you're equally odd, so no judgment. Whew. Great, guys. I found my tribe. Mindy, you'd like to know if all birds have a crop. Um, so this is an interesting question because I have found conflicting information about this, and I think it's not actually conflicting information as much as it is that I may not fully understand the function of a crop because I have read many times that penguins don't have a crop. And even sometimes I've read that particularly it's seed eaters that are most likely to have a crop. But I know that penguins produce crop milk. So where is it being produced? So this has kind of taken me to a point where I'm wondering that maybe a crop in terms of anatomy is main function is not just to hold food. Maybe it's a part of the anatomy that can have and be adapted to different functions depending on the evolution of that specific bird. I think it depends very much on the digestive system of a bird. Because essentially, at least what I've come to understand, is that essentially a crop is just an enlarged part of the esophagus. Now, whether that's used to store food in all birds or not is the question. Because when we think of a crop, we think of it as food storage for the bird, right? And that's where I think the challenge is, and that's where the difference is. In that enlarged part of the esophagus, which may be present in all birds, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be used as a place to store food. I mean, one bird that I've also heard doesn't have a crop is an owl. But I think that there are lots of little exceptions, and I think it fundamentally comes down to anatomically what is the function of the crop, and does size depend on how it's used, and all those sorts of things. So yet again, Mindy, I will be doing more homework. They're always wondering if I'm talking about them, Mindy, even when I used to do the Penguin Beach program, a live show that we used to have on Wild Earth. They would look at me the same. Are you talking about me? Maybe. This particular penguin has a really cute white spot on his tail, or her tail. It's trying to hide that white spot from us. Show us your cute white spot. There we go. We can kind of see the white spot in the tail. Very cute. Interesting to note at which point the penguin enters the water as the tide is moving out. And it took a while to figure out when the right point is. So it entered the water, jumped in as the water was receding, but then hopped or kind of like leaped to swim once the water came back in. I guess it makes sense. They need sufficient water to actually start swimming. PB and Jam, you wanted to know if penguins or African penguins migrate. No, they don't. So this is the Stony Point colony and the Boulders Beach colony are two mainland colonies that the African penguins use as their homes. And those are permanent colonies, so they don't migrate. What does happen, though, is that before the final molt to get to the adult plumage, so subadult penguins, they go out into the ocean and they can spend a year, even a year and a half to 2 years, just moving around. And they're basically trying to fatten up as much as possible before they return to their natal colony and have their final molting stage to reach their adult plumage. So that's definitely not a migration, it's just a movement. And they will almost always return to their natal colony. I was once if you're familiar with the Cape Town coast, I once was driving around Misty Cliffs and I was heading towards Komiki. And I looked out the window and there was a penguin on the beach. And it was a subadult, so it was somewhere along its journey. Its year to 2 year journey of kind of rite of passage of finding itself, fattening up, getting ready to become an adult. And it looked so exhausted. And then it promptly left the beach and continued on its way. No doubt back towards its natal colony. I don't know if it was going back to the Boulders colony or going back to the Stony Point colony, or maybe it had just started and was on its way out. But you might see them dotted along the coast, but you're most likely going to see subadults that are in that window of development. And here we have some lovely cormorants just enjoying themselves. I love that we can see both cormorants and penguins here at the Stony Point camera. And on Monday we saw them actually I don't know if playing is the right word. Irritating each other is probably a better phrase. My pleasure, Erica, and I hope that I will get to see all of you again. I'm not going to be taking live at the waterhole for the next while, but hopefully I will see you in some other way. If not during live drives, then maybe some live at the waterhole in February or in March. I actually have a very exciting project that's happening in 10 days. So I'll be in Australia for 2 weeks, filming some cool animals. So once that's all done, then I can return to doing more live at the waterhole and spending time with all of you, and then sharing what cool things I learned about the animals that I get to film. Deb Davis, when I read your question, I thought it said, do you spend time alone? And I was about to tell you that, you know what, I really enjoy spending time alone, reading a book, but then I realized that you actually meant, do they spend time alone? Not really. What I have noticed from spending time with African penguins is that they have a very defined personal space. So even though on other parts of Stony Point, you might even see them standing just like these cormorants are, these Cape cormorants are. You might see them standing not even a meter from each other, but somehow they know exactly where their personal space starts, and if someone invades it, they get quite angry and they can have fights. So I don't know if, having that 1 meter radius around them is considered being alone. But for the most part, they're just with the colony constantly. Even when they're nesting, nest sites are right next to each other. There might be a time where if they're incubating eggs, then you might see one parent on their own. But even when they go out to hunt, they're leaving together, but they're not specifically hunting together, but they leave together. And they don't hunt in groups either, they hunt as individuals. So in a way, the colony is kind of like a suburb. So you're not necessarily helping the guy who lives 2 streets away. In fact, you might not even know him or care about him. But you all live in the same area. And when there's a problem in the community, you're all invested. And I think colonies are kind of like that. And maybe, unfortunately, they don't get alone time because of it. Thank you very much, Ari, for joining us. And we hope that you'll join us again very soon. Well, from the goodbyes and the thanks, I'm sure that you've all gathered that it is time to say goodbye. It has been wonderful to spend time with all of you. Pink Ellie, you're also saying goodbye, and that I should enjoy my happy time. Thanks so much, everyone. I'll talk to you soon, and bye for now.